and the Honourable Attorney General and Minister for Economy, Civil Service and Community.
You'll see that the content of the website is very similar.
Bulavinaka, and a very good morning to you all. Thank you for all being here this morning and what is truly a historic occasion. Today we are launching a website that puts the consolidated laws of Fiji online and free for the first time ever, providing an easy to use one-stop online resource that allows anyone, anywhere to read and access the laws of our country. Some of you will remember back in 2016 when we unveiled the consolidated laws of Fiji, first time we had undertaken consultation of our laws since 1985. Today we're building on that achievement as we've digitized every page of every volume of the consolidated laws of Fiji, which can now be accessed on this new website and which will be consolidated quarterly, and every new legislation in between will be available online immediately. But before we get to the website, I want to make an important point. The laws of our country, as written, are not cast in stone, nor are they unmovable. As arguments are put forward in our courts, as judgments are delivered, as society changes, as technology is introduced, and as jurisprudence is developed, the law evolves. I would like to begin this morning by acknowledging and celebrating an individual who has made an historic contribution in doing just that, interpreting our laws, furthering our understanding and strengthening our judicial institutions. I am of course speaking of His Lordship, the Honourable Chief Justice, Mr. Justice Anthony Gates. Your Lordship, I'd like to congratulate you on the recent announcement of your retirement and thank you for your years of service to our nation. Words will never capture that totality of what you have given Fiji and our people. But on behalf of the Fijian government and the Fijian people, I would like to add my own voice to the outpouring of gratitude across the nation. It was in 1977 that when you first came to Fiji, then as a prosecutor. You went on to become the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions and then a magistrate in 1985. After that time, you returned to Australia, but you couldn't stay away from us for too long. In 1993, you returned to Fiji, first as a lawyer, but then you moved to the bench as a judge of the High Court in 1999. From there, you presided over historic and consequential cases, preserving the rule of law even in the face of enormous challenges. That tenure alone would have ranked as an impressive contribution to the Fijian judicial system. But that was only the beginning of your service to our country. The real test was yet to come. From those of you who practiced law in Fiji from 2006 until 2009, you remember the gravity of the situation Fiji faced at that time. Let's be frank, we had some massive gaps in the Fijian judiciary. Certain governments in the region were blatantly interfering with our independent institutions, discouraging anyone from taking a post that needed filling. At home and overseas, there was a mountain of diplomatic, social and professional pressure on the shoulders of anyone brave enough to fill the ranks of our judicial system. Justice Gates was the brave one. In this era of what can be called diplomatically pugnacious behavior, it was the Fijian people who suffered as a result. It was the Fijian people whose access to justice was put at risk. It was Fijian institutions that were made weak, institutions that are necessary to support a stable society. Our need was great. Fiji needed judicial officers who were not only capable, but who had the principled perseverance to stand up for justice and the rule of law. We found that perseverance in Justice Anthony Gates. Following the abrogation of the Constitution in 2009, when others left the judiciary or chose to sit on the proverbial fence, your Lordship stood firm to serve the Fijian people and to ensure that justice was delivered to all Fijians. Your Lordship, you stood up against forces of interference when few others would. You helped preserve the rule of law in a tumultuous time. You stood with Fiji. You stood with the Fijian people. You stood for their right to justice. You put self-interest aside and you stood for something bigger than yourself. The courage of that stance will never be forgotten. From 2009, in spite of all the hurdles placed by certain governments and individuals, including members of the legal profession, some of them, your Lordship dedicated your time and left no stones unturned to ensure that capable persons were appointed to the judiciary and that access to justice continued to all Fijians. Your unshakable perseverance and your faith in Fiji formed a key pillar of support for the democracy we know today. By upholding the rule of law in a difficult time, you helped carry Fiji towards formulation and passage of the 2013 Fijian Constitution and on to the 2014 elections. And in fact, His Lordship was the acting president when he signed the writ of elections for the 2014 elections, our first ever genuine parliamentary elections. Today, we see your legacy all around us. We see it in the strength of our independent judiciary. We see it in the confidence the Fijian people hold in our system of law. We see it in Fiji's proud democracy, where finally every voice and every vote matter equally. In your time as Chief Justice, your immense impact has been felt far beyond the courtroom. You helped make justice a more tangible good in the lives of the Fijian people. Your commitment to openness and transparency has helped transform justice into something more people can understand and use for their benefit. The independence and integrity in our courts has produced strong Fijian institutions of justice, the foundation of any safe and prosperous society. Your Lordship, you certainly have our gratitude. But to truly honor your service, gratitude is not enough. You've always been a man who values principles over politics, virtue over reputation, and actions over words and pleasantries. So to best honor your legacy, we must continue to fuel the fire that you started. We must keep on persevering. We must continue to spread access to justice to every corner of the country, bringing it to the doorsteps of Fijians no matter where they may be in our country. We must continue to bring transparency to our judicial system. We must continue to uproot corruption in all of its ugly forms. None of that will happen overnight, but it will happen. It is happening as we speak. Your Lordship, I believe it was you who best summed up the approach and philosophy that has led you to become such a revered figure in our judiciary. When addressing staff at the Legal Aid Commission, you said on the subject of public service that, and I quote, "If you care about the people you deal with, you'll be among the happiest people on the planet," unquote. Your Lordship, you've showed us anything throughout your career. If you have shown us anything throughout your career, it is that you, as both a judge and a man, truly care. You care about this nation. You care about its people. You care about our future. Thank you for the care you've shown, the courage you've shown, and the perseverance you've shown for Fiji. Although you are not a Fijian citizen, technically speaking, your commitment, your dedication, the time and energy you have given, and your perseverance despite the perils you've faced, despite the unfounded attacks against your reputation at certain times, and here you have stood firm with Fiji. And what can only be called your patriotism to Fiji in more ways than one is more patriotic than many Fijians themselves at a point in time. In the spirit of openness and transparency, you champion the launch of a website of the Laws of Fiji is a new benchmark of our country.
Singing, well, after the garlanding, we will then have the...
Honourable Judges, members of the Judiciary, Mr. Attorney, Mr. Solicitor, Honourable Ministers and Members of Parliament, members of Commissions, Director of Public Prosecutions, Director of Legal Aid, Your Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Ms. Mafanwi Walwork, the representative of LexisNexis, Madam President of the Fiji Law Society, Ms. Laurel Varasi, members of the Bar, distinguished guests. I had a slightly different vein in mind. Thank you, Mr. Attorney, for those generous words. I'm a little overwhelmed by them, and I'm sure I'm not deserving of them. As they often say when they're moving admissions or petition of admission rather before me, they say, and on a personal note, I will return to my speech, which I think perhaps is more light-hearted. In 1956, the director Cecil B. DeMille released his film, The Ten Commandments. It had Charlton Heston as Moses and Yul Brynner as his stepbrother Ramses. The movie was full of excitement, with the pursuit of the Israelites by the Egyptian cavalry across the Red Sea, a sea which miraculously parted, or was it just a tsunami? In the film, there were pagan revelries, a burning bush, a magic staff, and even a launch, one more famous even than that for the website for the Laws of Fiji, if only just, namely that of Moses in a basket being pushed out into the main current of the Nile. Critics turned up their noses at this movie melodrama, this blockbuster. They said it was garish and lurid, vulgar and shallow. Its budget had been $13 million. But in spite of these criticisms, it broke all records by earning at the box office $131 million, a huge sum in the 1950s. Memorably, Time magazine's critic concluded his piece by saying, "Christianity, which has survived the crucifixion, the Crusades, and the Reformation, may yet survive this film." Fortunately, as we know, the baby Moses did not have to wait long before being noticed by Pharaoh's sister. He was only to be snagged in the bulrushes for a moment, before soon becoming pride of place in the palace. Of course, all of these, or all of those snide comments from critics have no applicability to our lovely volumes of the Laws of Fiji. For those who can afford it, the red volumes now grace our shelves as in a cardinal's inner rooms at the Vatican. But the anticipation was for the release or the launch of the online access. So much so that our venue for today had to be moved to this larger, more grandiose, newly renovated conference room here at the GPH. The wait from 2016 has all been worth it. For the film buffs, it had the suspense of Hitchcock and the spectacle of DeMille. Another critic put it more mundanely, that's of the film, an epic soap opera of an event. The running time is longer than any church service that still impresses more than it amuses. The website for the online laws is an epic event for today, and its breadth and usefulness is definitive and impressive. Lawyers and judges will find it a reliable source of our laws. The rule of law and our access to justice by our access to the laws are hereby preserved, protected, and promoted. When I arrived in Fiji in 1977, we had the green volumes of laws and the brown volumes of amending legislation. One had to be cross-referenced with the other. There was always a certain amount of guesswork. Some of the more experienced practitioners carried the state of the laws, indeed of their very existence, around in their heads. Then came the black volumes of 1985. This revision was quite a boon at the time. It was made for updating with loose-leaf pages. These invariably did not get inserted, and the question of the existence of amendments was sometimes, therefore, in doubt. 30 years later came the red volumes of 2016. Fijian laws therein had been consolidated and published as a revised edition. Indeed, it could be said to have been a strikingly bold revision. The consolidation involved a substantial amount of work. A number of modifications were made to the laws for consistency, including revisions to remove gender and ethnic discriminatory terms. The changes reflected the reforms brought in by the Constitution of 2013, and the laws were aligned accordingly. Since the launch of the 2016 Laws of Fiji, Parliament has enacted 83 acts and 247 legal notices have been published. These laws have been incorporated into the Laws of Fiji by way of service updates. To date, 5 service updates have been published, and the 6th service update is expected for delivery in the first week of April. This will update the Laws of Fiji to include the laws published on or before the 28th of February 2019. With the launch of the website for the Laws of Fiji, the consolidated laws are now available online. This will not only make research easier, swifter, and more accurate for thorough, well-prepared lawyers, it will also provide access to the laws of the land for ordinary Fijians, indeed for all Fijians. The website address is www.laws.gov.fj. The website has been developed with LexisNexis, which had also assisted with the publication of the revised edition of the Laws of Fiji in 2016, the Red Volumes. The Red Volumes comprise 20 volumes of our laws. These include 370 acts and 884 subsidiary laws. All of these are available as consolidated laws on the website. How to reach them will soon be revealed. The website features the same text that appears in the published version of the laws and contains historical notes that show how the law has been amended. These notes, as advocates and appellate advocates will know, will assist in distinguishing earlier case law and with chronological context for the laws at the time of events in those cases. Helpfully, also, the website will be updated regularly. Currently, it includes the consolidation of the laws published on or before the 28th of February 2019. You will hear more shortly on how you will be able to check for new legislation or rules passed or promulgated after the last update was made. The speed with which the amendments reach the main text, no doubt, will increase. The website initiative has been blessed to have the full support and leadership of the Honourable Prime Minister and the Honourable Attorney General. They are to be thanked for this lead. Thanks especially for the denizens of the night, Deputy Solicitor General Tracy Wong and her team, who have been beavering away at the Attorney General's chambers. Tracy and team worked tirelessly with other beavers, namely the developer of the website functionality, Miss Mary Wong, in turn under the benevolent leadership of Miss Mafanwe Woolwork, who are both here, of LexisNexis. Clearly, it has been a fine partnership for the stressful work of meeting deadlines. The nation's thanks, as well as that individually of all lawyers and the judges, magistrates, masters, tribunals of Fiji are expressed today. These laws and website are, for us indeed, the 10 Commandments. They are volumes and website, as my old headmaster used to say, lovely and of good report. Perhaps my report wasn't so good. They will assist us greatly. Maybe for today's event, Mr. DeMille would have had flashing lasers, Egyptian slaves, and elephants on the stage. Their flight on MAX 8 was cancelled, so you'll have to be content with a lesser spectacle. Now we're ready for the launch.
Is one that goes in the Fiji's National Development Plan.
You to evacuate. In that case, be allowed. Demonstration of the website from the Deputy Solicitor. General